of investment has come in the startup space, which is more than the total amount we got in the last year, and perhaps more than the amount we got in the few years before that combined. And so Pakistan is starting to appear on the radar of global investors. And all leading publications, from Forbes to other local journals, have published articles about Pakistan. TechCrunch being one of them, and tier one investors from all around the world, from Hong Kong to the US, are investing. And we also did a capital raise, and we also got global investors from all around the world. And today I'm delighted to have one of our investors join us, Jonathan Bond from TTB Partners. And actually, instead of doing it over Zoom, John is sitting with me. So welcome, John.
Hi, everybody.
He's based in Hong Kong, but he's now back in London. And so I was lucky to have him over to my place. And I'll give a little bit of background of TTB, but I'll pass it over to John, and I'll ask him more about TTB, what kind of investments they do, John's own background, and his team. But I should mention it out because one of the senior advisors is Sir John Bond, who, of course, a lot of you might have known about him. He's a legendary figure in the financial markets. He was a CEO, chairman of HSBC. So when I was studying at Oxford and I was reading about financial markets, I studied about Sir John Bond and his career and his what he achieved at HSBC. So and then, of course, after HSBC, Sir John became the chairman of Vodafone, then of Strata, the global mining company, and now he's on the board of KKR. And I'm sure there are other boards he's member of and other things which he has done, which I missed out. But I'm sure if you Google about Sir John, you'll find more about it. And Jonathan is his son as well. So John, delighted to have you here.
Thank you, Alan.
I'll sit down now and I'll ask those questions. The format of this webinar, like our earlier webinars, would be that I'll ask John a few questions for the next 20 minutes, and then we'll open up for Q&A. And for questions, please write your questions on chat, and I'll pass them over to John at that time. So I'll start off, John. It would be great to get some more background of TTB. What kind of investments do you do? What are the other activities, and also a bit about the team?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, firstly, thank you so much to the people of Pakistan and the investment community for receiving our investment so well. I mean, we've been overwhelmed by the response to our investment in K-Trade. And, the firm TTB, which was founded 5 years ago by myself and two other partners, Teresa Teague and Chris Schooler, is essentially a banking team. But what we realized quite quickly was that every financial company in this day and age has to become fintech in some capacity, otherwise you don't survive. And what we decided to do at a very early stage was to make investments in companies such as K-Trade, very innovative companies run by very smart people, probably much smarter than us.
That's kind of
and by learning off them and by iterating our model, creating value for our investors too. So TTB, just for those that don't know us, and I'm sure there are many of you that don't, we're based in Hong Kong. We have sort of 4 business verticals. We have an M&A vertical, which is essentially raising money for people. We have a venture vehicle, which invests in companies like K-Trade. And we have a portfolio of about 8 companies that we've invested in so far. We then have a sort of crypto and DeFi business. And then we have an asset management sort of GP stake business as well. So we have 4 tranches. But the overlay of all of that is finding technologies that make us better at our jobs. And that's the core thesis that we're running with.
That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that, John. And John, in terms of team, of course, you have more than 25 years experience. You were at Merrill.
Thanks for reminding my age.
And John and I worked together. I worked for him when he ran a hedge fund in London, which was an emerging markets, equity, long short hedge fund. I was an analyst at that firm, and investing in all the exciting markets, including Pakistan, starting from Russia, going down to Eastern Europe, Middle East. We extended it to Pakistan and all the way down to South Africa. And then John moved to Hong Kong, and now we reconnected. So John, you have buy-side as well as sell-side experience. Teresa, I think, was at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, M&A.
And
yeah.
She dealt with tech deals.
She did consumer tech for a long time and was based in New York, London, and then subsequently Asia as well. And then she worked very closely on M&A in and around the consumer tech space, which, really you're getting at this moment, which is, I think, the most interesting part of the world, just amalgamation of consumer tech, media tech, finance tech, and it's just all becoming sort of almost, not homogenous is the wrong word, but sort of all intertwined and interrelated. And so it's silly to define one part of finance without bringing in other parts of sort of the global ecosystem as well. But yeah, and then there's Chris Scooter was our third partner. He was the CFO of CLSA, which is a big brokerage firm out there.
Absolutely. So we in Pakistan, people do know CLSA because CLSA has, because of the China angle, they did invest in an investment bank in Pakistan, and they were very bullish on Pakistan. So Chris used to be the CFO of CLSA, and now he is your partner.
He is my partner, and he keeps us all in check, because actually the decision we made is that the front end is one thing, but when you build a company, the back end is incredibly important, and making sure operationally you're incredibly safe. I mean, Chris does everything. He's sort of at the front end and the back end, but he oversees our entire infrastructure of the company. But actually, the core theme, actually, which I think is really important and relates to Pakistan in particular, is the best places to go are where people aren't. And I think as I look at Pakistan now, and I look at Bangladesh in a similar light, actually, these are like Indonesia maybe 3 years ago, China maybe 15 years ago, with this tremendous population, rapidly growing middle class. And if you go early into these areas and you work with people like you, Ali, who are really knowledgeable and in touch with the local systems, it's a really interesting area, not both from a profitability standpoint, but also an inclusiveness standpoint. Part of our thing that we're really keen to do is not just try and make money. We're actually trying to improve people's lifestyles and make things better for people. And looking at the talent that's within Pakistan, having known it for a long period of time, including when we were investing together back in 2008, 2007, you can just see these places are ripe for growth, innovation, and acceleration. And with that, hopefully the whole lifestyle of people improves as well. And so when we look at investments, one of the things we look at actually is, firstly, is it a crowded market? Who's deploying capital there? What does the actual demographic look like? What's the education systems look like? We take a very top-down view of things. And then we try and find really good local people to go into. There's no point of us trying to do it on our own. Like we just get eaten alive. So we have to partner with selective people. And we've done it in quite a few investments. But all along, we try and include this inclusive element where we can try and hopefully improve the lives of people that were in the country that we're investing in.
Thank you. And I will come back to this question and ask you more details on this. But thank you for giving us the framework of, why did you choose Pakistan and why do you like Bangladesh as well? But before that, I want to ask more about TTB.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about the kind of investments you have done, their sizes, their sectors? You also mentioned crypto. So that's very interesting area, or at least there's a lot of interest in it and very strong opinions about it, both good for and against. But would love to know, where have you put your bets, both in overall and in crypto?
Yeah, it's an important question. I mean, firstly, we are a finance firm, so our DNA is finance. And so all the stuff that we are investing in is in and around finance. So wealth tech, insurtech, fintech, obviously, in a sort of wider encompassing area, but also obviously touching with K-Trade, the democratization of finance too. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out which companies are going to be important moving forward, which sounds a very obvious thing to say, but actually it's quite hard to find areas which have good demographics, good management teams, good fundamentals to invest in. And we spend a lot of time weeding out stuff that we wouldn't invest in. So, I mean, it's a very boring answer, but really it's around finance, and it's around stuff that we think is going to change what finance looks like. And I think you look at where it was, the financial systems in maybe 2006, 2008, it was all the big banks. It was, dare I say, HSBC, Standard Chartered, Citi. I mean, these companies still exist, but look at all the other companies that have come through now, the neobanks, the wealth platforms, all coming from a tech base. And I was discussing actually with Nick, who's in the room here, who's our head of Europe and a partner at TTB, I mean, the pace of change is just incredible. And the last 3 years has probably doubled where it was 15 years ago in terms of you're a fintech guy. But unless we're there investing or at least moving ourselves, we're going to be left behind. So that's why we stick with finance. Teresa would love us to do consumer, but that's her background. But strategically, it doesn't make much sense.
So essentially, you're saying that because of your financial services background, your team and organization, the investments, and that's the underlying theme across your investments.
Yeah.
Crypto, can you tell about the kind of investments you have done and why, and what do you think of crypto?
Yeah, so again, it's a very topical question. So our general philosophy is that I think we are decent allocators of capital, but we only allocate capital to where people are, as I point out, much smarter than we are. And crypto is a space which, I'm 45 years old, is not native to me, crypto. And so what we do is we find a partner, and we found an excellent one in a firm called Everest Group that are based in Hong Kong, but it's a Chinese tech team. And we say to them, what should we be doing here? And we would invest with them, alongside them, and we build things together. And I think the one thing that's certain about crypto, there's clearly a very complicated and nuanced part of the market. But what's very clear is that digitalization is coming. And so how that comes is...
Can you hold this? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Some people are saying that it's not, my voice is not clear.
How that comes, we don't quite know. But if Bitcoin is clearly the flavor at the moment, but there could be something that comes along in a year, 6 months that changes all of that. So we're very open-minded about crypto. We know it's coming because that's just the trend of where finance is heading. What it looks like from a regulatory point of view, what it looks like from a capital investment point of view, we still need to understand better, and we're still considering. But it's definitely coming. It's definitely here to stay, and we need to understand it as well as we can. But that means partnering with people that understand it better than us.
I have a follow-up on that, and I'm sorry for shouting, Nick and John. It's just because I've been told that my voice is not that clear, so I'll be speaking loudly. But in terms of crypto, because you said that your investment in Everest Group is because they know more about it, so you are co-investing with them because you do think that crypto has a future. But I'm aware that your LPs and the people you interact with are top-tier institutions.
Yeah.
So I would love to know, what are those guys thinking? Where are they placing their bets? Because as we know, institutions have stronger inertia.
Yeah.
So I know Everest Group has raised some more money from some top institutions. So if you can mention that, or otherwise I can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very true, because I think you look at these, I guess, the stalwarts of finance in the last 40 years. I mean, they have a big decision to make, right? I mean, there's partly the regulatory situation, which is still very opaque. What do these guys, what is going to be allowed? We still don't really have a good idea. I think IPOs like Coinbase clearly help with mainstreaming crypto. And I think regulators are trying to get a handle on it. But for the moment, it's very hard for these guys to operate, because if you're a blue chip finance firm, it's a risk. I mean, this is a very nascent, still remains a very nascent part of the ecosystem. So that's why I feel investing actually is a better thing to do, because at least you're sort of slightly at arm's length, but you can obviously embrace when the time is right. For these big corporations, for us, we can probably have a slightly higher risk tolerance. I mean, we're fully regulated, so we have to obviously adhere to all the correct principles, but we can be slightly more open-minded as to what we can do. Whereas, if I'm dealing with regulatory issues in UK, America, then that's going to be slightly more complicated. But I mean, it's all moving in the right direction, put it that way. And I think we will start to see big institutions coming into this space, which is great for people who are building around the ecosystem, because it leads to exits, it leads to investment. I mean, there's a lot of money, I think, that will end up in crypto and digital assets moving forward.
Very interesting. And John, now coming to Pakistan, because I think that's what most people over here on the call would be most interested in terms of, what kind of investments can you look at in Pakistan? And you have highlighted that, fintech is one area which is of main interest for you. Before that, so Pakistan saw a lot of Chinese investments, which came because of the Belt and Road Initiative, almost till 2 years ago. They're still coming, but there was a massive influx of state investment of close to around $40 to $50 billion.
Yeah.
At least that the number which was announced, and perhaps the overall number was slightly lesser, but still very, very meaningful for a country like Pakistan. Only now we are starting to see private companies investing. So yesterday I read that Xiaomi is opening up a local assembly plant in Pakistan. What are you hearing? And you're close to Chinese, you're based in Hong Kong, you do tech. Do you think that there is or there will be interest from large Chinese companies and investors in investing in Pakistan?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And for the reasons I mentioned earlier in the phone call, I mean, first, it's a wonderful country, but secondly, it's got a tremendous demographic. I think 225 million people.
Yes.
A really emerging, very good cricket team, emerging, middle class, and the proximity to China obviously is borderline, so it's on the border. So from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense, and they've obviously had a close relationship for a long period of time at a governmental level too. But I mean, I don't think it's just China. I think there's going to be a lot more interest from global investment into Pakistan, because I mean, if you look at the geopolitical situation of it, it's an incredibly important piece of the jigsaw. I mean, it sits really between South Asia, East Asia, and the Middle East, and the world. I mean, I keep going back to sort of Southeast Asia, and you've looked at all the capital flows into Southeast Asia, and to be honest, we missed that because we only founded our firm in 2016, 17. But Indonesia now, that you go down there, it's a bucket loads of interest. And I see Bangladesh and Pakistan heading in that direction too of capital flows. So yes, in answer to your question, yes, very much so.
So I hope that you will play, and your investments will play a role in being a catalyst for getting more Chinese to invest and more Chinese companies to enter Pakistan, especially geopolitically. I think that the whole China-India thing might just push more Chinese companies to invest in Pakistan, because, as you said, Indonesia has already matured, it has played out, so it's a great example, and Pakistan and Bangladesh being the obvious next market with the similar dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, the critical thing to all these areas, again, is understanding the local cultures and understanding the local frameworks. And I think that that's always the hardest thing to overcome in investing in regions that we're perhaps not familiar with. And that's why local partners are incredibly important. I mean, you mentioned our investment side. I mean, we'd love to continue to deploy capital in Pakistan, but actually our M&A side of our business is probably going to be more relevant, because as companies, IPO or grow, or Chinese companies look for partners here, I think that's a real opportunity for us as well. So there's both the deployment side and allocating capital to Pakistan and the region, but also from an M&A perspective, I think it's going to be important too. And I mean, you'll know the ecosystem much better, but it always takes time for the big global banks to turn up in these places.
Absolutely. And so in M&A, can you elaborate a bit more about that for the audience in terms of, if TTB were to get interested in a Pakistani company from an M&A angle, will you be primarily looking at the Chinese angle in terms of selling those companies to large Chinese companies?
Yeah, well, I mean, open-minded. I mean, China's a natural, because China has liquidity, right? And most of the companies are fairly well funded. But Europe has a lot of liquidity too, and I'm sure they would have tremendous interest too. I mean, one of the beauties, I guess, about our model is we are sort of multicultural. We happily work with anyone who has interest in businesses that we're working with. So, but Europe is interesting because it's sort of, there's a lot of good stuff in Europe. There's a lot of capital in Europe and looking for opportunities. And I think if you look at, just being in London for the last 2 weeks, having left Hong Kong, lots of people looking for opportunities in Africa, in regions that are more, I guess, removed from the mainstream American sort of bond markets. So I'm really excited actually for the M&A part of emerging markets. Now, and Nick, who's sitting here, his role in London is to set us up with M&A opportunities and working with capital pools here to find transactions in places such as Pakistan. which is why we were so eager to do the K-Trade transaction.
Great, thank you. And I will ask John more about K-Trade and why he invested in that. And but before that, he made a point about cricket, and I totally ignored that given the fact what recently happened at Lodge. But John played cricket at Durham with Andrew Strauss.
That is true.
Who was England's captain. Perhaps he's knighted as well.
He's knighted, yeah.
So Sir Andrew.
Yeah, he was a better cricketer than me, as you might expect.
Just cricket has been a bit embarrassing in the last few days.
Yeah, but you got tremendous talent. I mean, it's just coming to England is always tough for sub-Asian tourists. I mean, it's swinging and seaming here.
Yes, though Pakistan always performs best in England.
True, well, you got the great bowlers.
Yeah, because of the bowling side. But I think this time they never got time to acclimatize because they never had any practice match.
So this is actually our forte. This is what we should be talking about.
Yeah, cricket. Every Pakistani gets talk better than me about cricket. I think that's the forte for everybody. But coming to K-Trade, so you said you like investing in fintech, you invested in K-Trade. And I know I asked this question not in terms of like asking you to say good things about K-Trade, but I want the audience to understand what's happening in the retail broking space globally. I'm asking you because I know that you have done work on it. Because in Pakistan, most people thought that this space didn't exist. They were more interested in digital banking and mobile wallets because that's what they had seen, or remittances.
Yeah.
So suddenly they see K-Trade and retail trading, and they don't kind of like know where that fits. So it would be great, given the fact that you have looked at the space, if you can tell the audience in terms of what's happening with retail stock trading.
Yeah, you got to look at the genesis of it actually, because if you think about when we were in asset management, information wasn't as available as it is today. So the internet has really changed. It's changed many things, and very obviously many things. But what people don't realize is how much it's changed finance. Because for us, or someone sitting in Singapore as a retail investor to research a firm, there's tons of information now on something. So you can actually come up with an objective opinion on a company without having to read brokerage reports from Merrill Lynch or Goldman Sachs or UBS. So you got to go back to the genesis of why people are now interested in taking into their own hands retail investing, i.e. allocating their own money rather than giving it to a BlackRock or a big pension fund or a big asset management firm to do it. So the rise of the retail investor has been an extraordinary thing to watch for us that came from institutional backgrounds. And it really sort of, I guess, crystallized with Wall Street Bets this year, where I think 2 or 3 hedge funds basically unraveled because of this extreme underappreciated culture. And the stigma of retail investing has historically been that these people don't really know what they're doing, which is absolute nonsense. Because if you look at the quality of the research from some of these guys on Wall Street Bets, I mean, they're talking about complex option strategies. I don't want to get too down the rabbit hole, but the general direction of where retail investing is going is very much in one direction, which is knowledgeable, smart people running money at cheaper costs for themselves. And I mean, it's been fascinating talking to you in the last 6 months. I mean, I've made 1 or 2 investments from our family office, my father's family office previously within this space, which has been fascinating to watch. And it gave me a good foundation for K-Trade. But just listening to you talk about, friends of yours who have now started to individually invest and take sort of their future into their own hands. And this is a trend that's going to increase. I mean, Robinhood's the obvious example because it came in and disrupted the entire sort of retail brokerage model. But I really believe that K-Trade will become essentially the Robinhood. And I mean that very generalistically because Robinhood has many challenges and it's had many publicity issues. But the general theme of what you're doing at K-Trade is absolutely spot on because it's 95% of the people on this, 99% of the people on this webcast are smarter than me. They should run their own money. Shouldn't be listening to us or, about what they should do with it. As long as they do it sensibly and they learn the risks of leverage, they learn the risks of, let them do it. That's kind of my take because why waste money paying high fees for institutions that give you cash returns?
Absolutely. I will have to take the mic to make a comment that, you're spot on that, and that in Pakistan, many people say to me that, maybe it's better to put money in mutual funds because we can't manage our money. Let's give it to somebody who can. And of course, that's a notion over here as well. And John, working with you at the hedge fund, I realized that the key difference at your place was because most of the money was yours. There was a lot more care, and then there was a lot more feeling, and which I don't think if it was third party money, you wouldn't really care about that money that much. So you're totally right that people who invest on their own, they actually learn about investing. They learn very quickly. It's not that people are stupid. In fact, we do this student competition called Trading Titans. And the last competition we did had 2,000 students from Pakistan, from 57 universities who participated. And the top 20 made returns of 50% plus, which are far superior than the index and far superior than most of the fund managers as well. And I think this is a trend which we've seen in almost every market, including the UK, that when people manage their own money, often they make better returns just because it's their own money rather than somebody else's money. So it's not, apologies to my friends who work at asset management companies and my clients. I have full respect for you. But this is just, the point is that incentives are aligned when people are managing. And as you said, now a lot more information is available than was in the past. Now we are open for questions. I do want people to ask questions rather than me hogging it. So please write your questions on chat and anything and everything which you want to ask. John and Nick is also here. And so, everything which you want to ask about TTB and their investments. And
Nick is a smart one, everyone. So the question should go to Nick.
Apologies, Nick. My camera didn't have longer zoom size. Otherwise, I would have requested Nick to also be in the frame. So we are open for questions. Do write your questions. In the meanwhile, because the question has not come yet, I'll pose the first question. John, in terms of ticket size, both for M&A as well as for your investments, what's the kind of ticket size we are talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Ali. It's so much. The whole. Actually, this works for retail investing as well. But the whole ethos for investing is risk management. So you can only really afford to invest what you can afford to lose is sort of our strategy. And that means as we evaluate a company, the higher the risk, obviously the less we, certainly at an early stage, invest. And then we try and ride it up as the company starts to scale. So we start really as a company around $250,000 US dollars, but we can obviously go quite a bit higher if we need to. M&A, quite honestly, we go huge. We have a very seasoned banking team that's done a lot of transactions in the multi-billions of dollars. So that's very flexible. But our main, I guess, is just managing the risk on the balance sheet and making sure we don't do anything that's too wild. So situational.
So it's pretty
situational.
Broad and starting with 250,000. So we have a question. Somebody's asking that what do you think of the potential of neobanks in Pakistan? Do you think there's a space for a Revolut, N26, or Nubank over here? Thank you for this question.
Probably a question for you. There surely must be. Again, I think the key thing for these neobanks, as ever, is managing the regulatory situation and making sure that they're compliant. And I think they're doing quite a good job of it. Ali, you actually would know more about neobanks than I would, because I think you've been quite close to them. But yeah, listen, if you look at Africa, you look at sort of, I guess, China to a certain degree, you've kind of had this ability to jump bricks and mortar and go straight to tech platforms. And so you haven't needed to go through the slow iterations that we've had, I guess, in UK or America, where you've started a bank and it's sort of gradually gone online. You can now sort of start an online bank and sort of, I'm not sure if that's the case in Pakistan, but certainly in China, with sort of WePay and things like that. So I think there's huge potential, because no one wants to go into branches anymore. And if it's digitized and it's convenient, it's on your phone, and smartphone penetration increases, it's got to happen. So, but I think it's really a question for how the regulatory world can react to these entities.
I agree with that totally. That I think regulation has the most to play in terms of.
Have you got anything in India and Pakistan?
We have a few, as in two of the largest mobile wallets in the world.
Yeah.
I think the top five are in Pakistan. So JazzCash,
So Jazz Cash, of course, yeah.
which has
Yeah,
around 15 million active users, and it's also a partner of K-Trade, and EasyPaisa, which is half owned by Ant Financial.
Right.
And so these are the incumbents in the space, and then there are newcomers coming in, such as NeaPay and SadaPay and Tag, and there are few which have raised substantial rounds of capital. And I agree with you that I think regulation would be the real enabler or disabler of success. One thing I would mention is that, of course, world has changed over the last 3 years, as you rightly said, that there was a pre-COVID, I would rather even say last 18 months. But until that time, even if you look at Africa, the real success story in Africa was only M-Pesa. While there were many clones of M-Pesa across Africa, every country in Africa had a local M-Pesa clone, but none of them were successful. You know why they were not successful? The only place they were successful is because it was a monopoly in Kenya, and it was not a monopoly elsewhere. So competition precludes the network effect. So that, which also shows you that copying does not really guarantee success. So, I know many people now in Pakistan saying we need to copy K-Trade and we need to copy K-Trade and we need to hire their people. Copying doesn't really lead to success. I can assure you that. There's another question. How do we see e-money and mobile wallets evolving in Pakistan? Indonesia had a fairly bloody cashback war that netted out with investors losing in a big time. Will it be different in Pakistan? This is a question from Hassan Ahmed. So he's saying, he's saying that Indonesia investors lost money because they had, in order to get customers, they were fighting with each other, right, and the loss. So it's, I think, going to the same point which I made, that if you're not a monopoly.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a really astute question and a very smart one. I mean, the amount of money, I mean, what's gone on in Indonesia, you've really had, I think, 4 sort of unicorns that have been fighting it out for market share, and it's cost a lot of money. We know some of these companies very well. I mean, the other interesting thing is how culturally sensitive some of these platforms are. For example, I think Indonesia has a very big or a very fanatical gold base. And so some of these wallets have gold because that's what they enjoy investing in, and that's where they feel their money is safest. So, but it's great knowledge. Yeah, that, I mean, these guys have been fighting an aggressive battle for market share, for wallet. Actually, a lot of it backed by the Chinese, by Ant and Tencent are down there and very active down in these regions. I mean, we'll see how Pakistan fares. I mean, I'm sure it'll be a very similar grab. But I think the people that win, from my experience of watching this stuff, is the guys that understand the local culture, what the retail investor wants, what the client wants. And I think that's really, really important in winning the battle locally.
Great, thank you. Moving to the next question is from Sher Shah Hassan. He's an entrepreneur, a very nice guy, and he's running a startup which is doing buy now, pay later. So his question is related to that. He's saying, how do you see lending in Pakistan and in other emerging countries, especially related to buy now, pay later and digital lending in particular?
Yeah, I mean, so this is a really, really complicated space, and it's, I think, one that data is going to play a massive role in. I mean, understanding who is the buy now, pay later customer. And I mean, it's obviously been an extremely successful model. I guess Klarna is in Europe is the highest or most well-known entity, but there are lots of clones popping up all over the place. But listen, I think the idea makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, it's totally logical that we should be able to pay installments. We pay our houses in installments, we pay our cars in installments, big ticket items, we should be able to pay in installments too. But I think the real key for this is watching the NPLs. And I think, having seen some of the data coming out of, in particular, if you look at Ant's NPL, Ant Financial, which obviously was going to do this big IPO, their NPL data was stunning because of the incredible data flow that they were seeing. And I'm slightly making up numbers here, so please don't quote me on it. But I think most NPLs in banks are around sort of 4% or something. I think Ant's were had shaved quite a bit of that 400 basis points off. And so data, I think, is going to be critical in determining who you buy now, pay later with. But again, definitely coming. I guess also related to regulatory issues within a country specific guise, but totally logical. Makes sense. Is that what StartUps doing?
Yes.
Well, let's have a look at the deck.
Shesha, you can share your deck. Good job. And I hope now you've gotten the answer where you need to focus on, which is data. And
How do you agree with that? Is that where you would say?
I do agree on exactly on both those points that the outcome of NPLs has varied from company to company and from country to country. And like if you remember back in the day, Wonga used to be one of the first unicorns in the UK, and then it got wiped out. It went down under because they were charging a very high rate to justify, because the NPLs were still very high. And once they had to reduce the interest rate, they couldn't survive. So you had example of that. In Germany, there were companies like Creditech. And again, most of these companies were like charging 1% per day.
Yeah.
So which compounds up to like 300 plus. Yeah, absolutely. So unless China was that great model, and Klarna another great model where they were able to actually get NPLs down and hence bring the cost down.
Right.
So that's why you really have to differentiate the pretenders from the innovators, because you can't do this business model in the pretending way where you're just charging higher rate.
I mean, I think the real message here is there are no shortcuts when it comes to finance either. I mean, you have to really stay disciplined in what you're doing, which is what Ant were incredibly successful in doing.
Absolutely. So we are waiting for, till the time we wait for more questions. Within the fintech space, so you've mentioned, I mean, you've invested in K-Trade, which is capital markets. You've answered questions on wallets and neobanks. We've discussed lending. Which other areas, crypto, you have already mentioned that. Which other areas are areas which you like and where you would like to invest, especially in Pakistan? If you had to send a message out that, these are the sectors which we want to focus on, which sectors will that be? And secondly, you mentioned both Pakistan and Bangladesh and about your plans over here. Can you elaborate on your plans as in terms of how much involved do you think TTB wants to be in these two countries? And then do you want to invest more? Do you want to go deep? Do you want to set a Pakistan fund? So people on this call, and how involved will you be in Pakistan?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the first question, which is where do we think there's opportunity in fintech? And I think really we sort of work backwards. We sort of take the view like, what is an inefficient part of the market? The insurance sector, for example, is a ridiculously inefficient marketplace and ripe for disruption in tech. And you're seeing a lot of insurtech coming into play. And there's a region in Asia called the Greater Bay Area, and it's essentially, again, don't quote me on the numbers, but I think about 60 to 70 million people, but it's a connection between Hong Kong, Macau, Zhuhai, and sort of Guangzhou. And it's just an extraordinary place to witness. But what we're looking at in those particular areas are insurtech and wealth tech in particular, where we think there's a lot of areas for sort of trimming the fat in terms of cost and automating a lot of the products. So I don't think, I think that would probably be more a global theme for us as well, rather than just a pure China, but that's where we're focusing at the moment. Aspirations for Pakistan and Bangladesh. I mean, I feel very lucky, Ali, to have obviously had a 15-year relationship with you, because you've been our eyes and ears in the region for certainly more recently, but for a long period of time, ever since I first started investing in 2007 and 8 in Pakistan. So much depends on the relationships. I mean, I don't think we're certainly totally self-aware to know that if we try to do these regions on our own, we would stand very little chance. They're much smarter, better connected people in the regions that would be able to outmaneuver us and move quicker than us. So partnerships are really important. And I think building relationships in all facets of life is the most critical part. So our aspirations are really I mean, firstly, wait, let me be very clear. We're super bullish on the region, but we have to be very careful because we don't want to be naive about what's out there, and we want to be very certain when we try and make bets. We try and make them with a lot of thought and consideration. So, but just look at Pakistan. The region itself, the potential is just amazing, and I think what we would like to be able to do, and this is really part of Nick's role as well, is to sort of make us. We are at heart an emerging market firm, and so our DNA. We find these markets really exciting, very stimulating. Meet some extraordinarily smart people, and we really enjoy it. And so that's why Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, China. That's our natural DNA. And using the capital pools that we can access in Europe, America, and Asia to invest alongside us or with us is what that's our bread and butter. Yeah.
That's music to my ears, that you'll be focusing more on Pakistan and in emerging markets, because as you said, it's your DNA, that's what your strategy. And of course, we at KSB and K-Trade would be delighted to support you in accessing Pakistan and doing more deals in Pakistan and investing in Pakistan. And you're right that it's still very greenfield, despite the fact that $100 million came to Pakistan over the last 6 months. India got $10 billion in the same time period. So the numbers we are talking about, if you compare that with any region, they are still minuscule. Although we should still celebrate success. And if you look at the VC funds in Pakistan, on average their size is like $15 million. And they are big. Those are the big VC funds. While $15 million, in London you would not have a fund with $15 million. Like economics of it wouldn't work. So certainly with K-Trade and KSB, we want now to do this seriously, and we really want to change Pakistan's tech and capital markets and investment ecosystem. And by partnering with and working with partners like you and investors like you. I think because that change and that maturity is required. So competition, who wants to copy my future, don't copy the back. I'm coming. But there's a great question from my friend Danish Lakhani, and you have already answered that question. So you wavelength matched. He's asking about InsurTech. Yeah. So you've already talked about it. Personally, I also feel that that's one sector which is, personally, I think it's the most attractive sector in Pakistan, just because, like in every sector, people enter the markets which they think are easiest to do. Yeah. So hence digital bank, because you just have to buy 5 software from some people and launch it. But the more technical you go in details, the harder it becomes and lesser the competition. And hence the bigger the opportunity. So what's your view on InsurTech in Pakistan?
Well, I mean, in terms of space, I mean, absolutely right. I mean, in InsurTech, insurance generally has been a very efficient business for a long period of time. And I mean, whenever I've tried to take a policy out, I mean, it's a joke. I don't know what to do. So simplifying it and making it touch point, totally interactive, massive opportunity. I'm not up to speed enough on the environment within Pakistan for insurance to know quite what it looks like. I'd like to learn, because I'd imagine that there's probably some very good startups that will come in the space that will really help streamline insurance. But I mean, look at the trend that's happened globally, and it's been insurance totally disrupted. But there's some amazing insurance companies as well. If you look at Ping An, you look at AIA, based out of Asia. I mean, these guys are super, super intelligent. And I think Ping An has 100,000 software engineers working for them. So if anyone has a startup in who's on this call at the moment and is doing stuff in InsurTech, I mean, I think all these companies in Asia would be very interested in looking at what you guys can do, what your angle is, what you're trying to, I guess, disrupt. Because they've been doing it themselves for the last 10, 15 years off their own balance sheets, so it's a really interesting space. I'm sure I'm not giving anywhere near the granularity that you require for this answer, because I don't know enough about the Pakistan insurance market, but I can only put it into a context globally and then sort of overlay it with where I'd imagine Pakistan would be within this. But I think that's where you'll see a lot of startups springing up, I would imagine. Yeah.
If I had money, insurance is certainly the sector I would like to invest in. And there is a listed company, TPL Insurance, which is listed. They recently raised capital from two investors, FinFund and DG. And my colleagues at KSB have written about that stock. And I think the stock is interesting and the group is interesting investment. We have 2 minutes left for this call. So we have time for one more questions, which we can squeeze in. So if somebody wants to pose the last question.
Who's the greatest Pakistani bowler of all time?
Okay, so we have gone that path. So let me ask this question because I think it's important for Pakistan. As a foreign investor, as a British financier, as somebody who has invested in many markets, what's your view? What's your perception of Imran Khan and the fact that he's the Prime Minister of Pakistan? How do you see that? Does that improve your image of Pakistan or diminishes? How do you see it?
I mean, it's fantastic. I think you've got to remember the West generally is more reluctant to learn about countries it doesn't understand than countries they don't understand is about the West. Take China, for example. All China's top leadership has read Shakespeare, The Fall of Rome. They understand the West really, really deeply. And I don't think, as a Brit, we try and understand cultures well enough. I might get a bit of blowback for that, but no, I mean, but I think the answer I guess I'm getting to is that putting something like Imran Khan, which is a household name in 90% of the globe. His exploits on the cricket field were unbelievable, but I think it really raises the profile of Pakistan and makes people comfortable because I think they can relate to someone who they've seen running in at Lords, bowling 88-mile-an-hour away swingers. And now he's done such a good job. I feel, I don't know because I haven't been to Pakistan recently, but it seems like he's doing a really good job of raising the profile of the country, helping the people within the country. And I think that can only be good. But I think from a sort of a very generalistic point of view, just knowing the name, being familiar with it gives confidence rather than, but I guess actually all the past leaderships I've known and understand as well. So, but I'm talking about sort of people that probably aren't as inquisitive as maybe I am. But yeah, I think it's a good thing. Very good thing.
Thank you for that. Or we can tell him that what you said. But certainly, that was not a political question, and I was not trying to get John to praise Imran Khan. So for those people on the call who might not like Imran, I do. But it was not that. The intention was really to. I think you've answered the question that given the familiarity, exactly, it actually eases or makes foreign investors more comfortable in looking at Pakistan. We have run out of time. Thank you, John, for your time. And lastly, how should people reach out to you if they want to talk to you? How should they connect with you?
Well, I mean, LinkedIn is the obvious one. I'm on there. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions or wants to pick my brain, a rare occasion that someone wants to pick my brain, but if someone would like any advice, do let me know. And I hope I can be helpful. But no, again, thank you so much for all the support we've had since we made our investment in K-Trade. Thanks to Ali. It's quite serendipitous to be partnered with you again. And thanks to everyone that took the time of day to listen. I hope it wasn't too dull.
It was certainly not. It was very optimistic. Foreign investors, global investors are investing in Pakistan, tier one kind of investors. And he has given you his details. He's given you the sectors where he's investing, also doing M&A, larger size M&A. So you know how to reach out. And we at KSB will be doing more of these events, showcasing and bringing investors and connecting them. And we will be investing ourselves as well. And we've just started. So what you've seen till now from us is the start, and you'll see how it grows. And inshallah, it will grow very quickly. And we are on a mission to democratize investments in Pakistan. Thank you for joining, and have a nice day. Khuda Hafiz.